Ja, dames en heren, dus welkom bij Jiktak Officiaal. En deze video is heel serieus. En deze video is, zoals ik heb gezegd, ik ga clips maken op Bulgaars, Engels en Nederlands. Dus deze video is wel op Nederlands. En vandaag gaan we bespreken over de wereld en over de oorlog. Oorlog in Oekraïne en Rusland. Alsjeblieft, dames en heren, heel die wereld, open jullie ogen en kijk naar de waarheid.
Dude, the official narrative on this whole war, it's just like it makes no sense. Again, like I said, remember, the same people who are pushing this are the ones who are telling you Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and stuff. But the official narrative, Joe, is basically that, Vladimir Putin is a madman, a crazy war criminal who's hell-bent on reforming the Soviet Union. And this is a real threat that he could do this. But also he's getting humiliated in this war in Ukraine. So like he's losing the poorest country in Europe, and he's just getting humiliated and beat back. But he's still a real threat to take over all of Europe. And he's a complete madman, by the way, Joe. But when he says he's going to use nuclear weapons, don't listen to that. He'd never actually do that, even though he's a complete madman. And as everyone says, this war, the word they use over and over and over again, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, all of them, unprovoked. Vladimir Putin led an unprovoked war in Ukraine. But then, it's just like with Osama bin Laden, what they did with him then. Don't listen to him. Whatever you do, don't listen to what he's actually saying, because none of that's his motivations. Like, what his motivations are what we tell you. Osama bin Laden hates us because we're free. And then, like, Ron Paul would just go like, yeah, but that's not what he's saying at all. Like, Osama bin Laden was so clear about why he hated America. And then he's like, look, I hate you because you murder innocent civilians in the Muslim world. You prop up brutal dictators in the Muslim world. You prop up Israel, who mistreats the Palestinian people. And you have your bases in our Holy Land in the Arabian Peninsula. And then they're like, nah, he hates us because we're free. Like, he didn't mention anything about freedom there. And then if you say that, they're like, well, are you defending Osama bin Laden? And you're like, no, I'm just saying listen to your enemies. There's a reason why he hates us. And if you listen to Vladimir Putin and what he's saying, I mean, look, he's wrong for invading Ukraine. And I mean, you know me, Joe. I'm the most anti-war fucking person there is, and there's no excuse for that. Like, tens of thousands of people have died. It's horrible, and a lot of them are soldiers, but a lot of them are civilians. And but to say he was unprovoked is like insane. It's just only people who know nothing about the history of this conflict would say there was no provocation.
Did you see the conversation that Roger Waters had with that CNN guy?
Yeah, right, because Roger Waters was awesome on that. Because he knows what he's talking about, dude. And he's right about all of that shit. Look, the promise, and this is what he was saying, he's absolutely right, that the promise when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and this was like verbally promised and put in writing, was that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. And NATO at that point, the line then was through Germany. Right, like the western half of Germany was in the west, and the eastern half was with the Soviet Union. And they were like, we'll let all of these nations, secede, and the Soviet Union will collapse, and we're giving up on communism. It's one of the greatest things that ever happened. And the deal was, okay, you do that, then we won't move NATO. We won't move our military alliance into your area that used to be your realm of influence. And every single president since then has moved NATO east, to the point that NATO is now on Russia's border. And in Ukraine, even though they didn't officially join NATO, there was always talk of it. Kamala Harris, right before the start of the war, said we're looking to put Ukraine into NATO. And they put under George W. Bush, they put in Poland these dual-use rocket launchers. There's a big complaint that Vladimir Putin has, that he's like, these can be used to get nukes here in a matter of minutes. Like, this is like a threat to us that we cannot tolerate. And then, in 2014, there was a coup in Ukraine that was completely led by the West. And I don't know if you've ever heard, but I think I sent you actually once the tape of Gideon Rose, who was the editor for Foreign Affairs magazine on the old Stephen Colbert Report show back when Colbert was hilarious. And he was just openly bragging about what the game is here. And then he was like, well, Ukraine is kind of like the Robin to Russia's Batman. And so our job is to steal Robin away from Batman and make him come over here and join us. And Vladimir Putin's so stupid that he won't do anything. And then Colbert's in his old character. So he's like, well, shouldn't Obama be spiking the football and saying, yeah, in your face, Putin? And Gideon Rose is like, well, no, because then Putin might invade Ukraine. So we wouldn't want to spike the ball, but there's these...
Let's play it. Let's play it. Go from the beginning.
Yeah, play it from the beginning.
There's the magazine, Foreign Affairs. Now, Gideon, help me out here. We've got a battle. The Ukraine, some of them want to go into the EU, the European Union, right? And some of them want to stay with Russia. If the Ukraine's not in Europe right now, what continent is it on?
Well, it's part of Eurasia, but it's part of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet bloc. It's basically Robin to Russia's Batman. And the challenge here is to try to attract it to the West, to get it to flip sides.
So the rebels in the streets, what are they fighting for?
They're fighting for a better future. Countries have a development.
That sounds like a political speech.
No, but it's actually true. Countries have to develop over time. And Ukraine, basically, after the end of the Soviet Union, faced two tracks. It could stay a sort of stagnant, corrupt, authoritarian country tied to Russia, or it could essentially join the West. It could modernize, liberalize, become a democracy. At the last minute, when it looked like it was going to trade up from its sort of abusive relationship with its boyfriend from the hood to a nice yuppie.
You're not loading these choices in any way whatsoever.
It's actually true. When it looked like it was going to trade up to a better environment, at the last minute, Putin offered a bribe.
How much?
$15 billion.
That's a lot of cash.
It's a lot of cash. And the president, who himself was tied to the old elites and the eastern part of the country with ties to Russia, decided to back off the change and go join Russia.
Do you know how many pirate-themed restaurants you can buy with $15 billion?
The problem was the western parts of the country and the younger parts of the country and the more modern liberal parts of the country basically knew that they had no future being Russia's vassal. So they took to the streets.
Is America taking sides in this in any way? If these people, the rebels are winning right now, right?
Yes, just recently.
Why isn't Obama spiking the ball in the end zone and calling Putin and saying, hey, you might have won the medal count, but we won the country count, biatch?
It's actually a very good question, and the answer is that we don't want Russia to intervene and kick over the table like a game of Risk and take Ukraine back. And so
would they do that? Could he send in troops?
Yes, he could.
Ja, de waarheid is mannen wat hij zegt. Ze willen wel een oorlog hebben, Oekraïne tegen Rusland, maar Amerika en Rusland niet. Dus die zullen wel kijken, Amerikanen zullen wel kijken hoe dat zij oorlog gaan hebben, Rusland en Oekraïne. En ja, ga, wij zijn de winnaars. Alsjeblieft. Dus het leven van mensen van Oekraïne, die worden heel die dag, heel die tijd gebombardeerd. Open jullie ogen, dat is de waarheid.
Do you know who's always good at a moment like that? Vladimir Putin. Do you think he might volunteer to come in and help Ukraine?
Door politieke gaan veel mensen dood. En politieke, Zelensky, Putin en Biden, die drinken wel wijn en zo.
We want a non-exclusive relationship with Ukraine. You can have a relationship with it too.
You're the only one making this into a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship.
Ukraine is basically choosing its future between two completely different courses of action, and we're trying to blur that choice so the old boyfriend doesn't get too upset when it makes the right choice.
Christ. So it's just all these George Soros-funded NGOs who are funding the militias on the ground who are overthrowing the government, and then there's a tape of Victoria Nuland, who was at the State Department at the time, one of the top people at the State Department, and she was basically talking about who would be the new government that took over, who America didn't want in, who we did want in the new government. So it's not, what happened basically was, as Gideon Rose was even saying, the Ukrainian government was kind of siding with Russia, or at least a lot more pro-Russia. And then we overthrew that government and installed a pro.
Dus, dames en heren, ik word echt kwaad, want ik ga jullie echt zeggen. Ik ben niet voor Rusland, ik ben niet voor Oekraïne. Maar mensen gaan dood, elke keer. In Oekraïne. En dus laten we zien en laten we kijken onze reporter Pauke Sharma. Wij heeft zij te zeggen over het oorlog en hoe dat Poetin de oorlog bekijkt?
Well, a lot depends on one man, Russian President Vladimir Putin. So far, the war has not panned out the way he wanted. But the failures on the battlefield have not really impacted his grip on power. There is no threat to his position at home. There is no challenger in sight in Moscow. So Putin is still in the driver's seat and he has already made his position clear. The Russian president says he will keep on fighting.
Step by step, we will carefully and systematically solve the problems before us.
That was Putin's message a few days ago. He's a man on a mission. For him, the battle for Ukraine is a personal one. Ukraine was a part of the erstwhile Soviet Union. It split in August 1991. A few months later, in December the same year, the Soviet Union fell apart. Putin termed its collapse as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. In the years that followed, as NATO expanded its wings in the region and Ukraine got closer to the West, Putin's urge for revenge grew stronger. For the Russian president, any attempt to integrate Ukraine into the West is a red line, one that shouldn't be crossed. It is also a personal loss for him, because as president, Putin has made efforts to keep Ukraine within Russia's fold. Let me show you some pictures, in fact, they're from 2004. And that is Putin in central Kiev attending a parade as a special guest. It was a special occasion, the anniversary of the liberation of Ukraine from Nazi Germany. On display was Soviet-style pomp and politics. Putin was visiting Kiev just before a presidential election. Alongside him was Viktor Yanukovych. He was then a presidential candidate, seeking Putin's endorsement perhaps. Yanukovych went on to win this election. Amid allegations of vote rigging, he eventually went on to serve as the fourth president of Ukraine. You see, Putin's influence ran deep in Kiev. That's not the case anymore. With this war, perhaps he wants to regain the influence. But why did he make such a risky gamble for it? You could say that's Putin's style. He takes risks, sometimes to the point of brinkmanship. In his early days, it is said that he was combative in school. He did not hesitate in picking a fight. At the age of 16, he apparently approached the KGB himself. KGB was the intelligence agency of the Soviet Union. Putin went to the headquarters in Leningrad himself and he wanted to meet an officer to ask what he had to do to become a spy. From his KGB days to the presidency, Putin continued to rely on his risk-taking abilities. He went to war in Georgia. He sent troops to support the Assad regime in Syria. He also annexed Crimea, an operation that perhaps laid the groundwork for the current invasion of Ukraine. And interestingly, Putin has never lost a war. He has no intention of losing in Ukraine either. But how does he plan to reverse his fortunes? How will he win in Ukraine? With more troops, weapons, and firepower. That's what he's betting on. Moscow has already mobilized 500,000 new conscripts. In the long term, he wants to expand military ranks. Putin has already approved the plans. The size of the military will go up by 50%. So the Russian president is preparing for the long haul.
Dus, dames en heren, dat was wel voor vandaag. Hè. Ik hoop like en subscribe en ik hoop dat jullie dat goed vinden. Open jullie ogen, broeders en zusters, want oorlog is nooit goed. Innocent people, they are getting killed every day. Oorlog is nooit goed. Dus Rusland, Oekraïne, heel de wereld, peace.